Welcome back to another episode of the Thunderstock Show, a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, your liberty, your pursuit of property, just as the founding fathers would want it to be. Straight out of the National Cemetery, Arlington, we have Patrick O'Connell. We're going to talk about how to make some money today, guys. It's pursuit of property time. Buckle up. Patrick, how you doing today?
I'm good. Excited to dive in. Let's do it.
Been talking to you for a while. It's been long anticipated to get this done, and we got a gap in the calendar, so stoked. Patrick, we have some commonalities in the background, both retired from the private equity space. You had investment banking under your belt several years, and tell me, when you were growing up, like when you were in school, did you always know that you wanted to do PE, investment banking, and help with buy sell businesses, or that's something you discovered the passion for later?
So I definitely didn't expect myself to land in that ecosystem. What I did was, I've always been an entrepreneur. Like since I was, the minute I could walk, I was thinking of businesses and ways to make money. My first business was a lawn care business with my brother. We started it probably 8 years old. That store, and we soon quickly became like the lawn business of our development growing up. And from there, I just got hooked. And the reason I love entrepreneurship is control your own destiny, unlimited upside. That natural transition of entrepreneurship and, sweat equity equals the amount of money you make led me to private equity, banking, and in general. But no, if you asked me, when I was growing up, if I was going to be, in the PE M&A space, I would have told you, what is M&A?
You just knew that you love to get rewarded for your sweat and maximize the upside. And a lot of what you do probably is to minimize downside too, right? To make that spread healthy for you and your clients. What was it like your first step in the corporate world after graduating college?
Yeah, so I started my career in professional audit services in like top 10 firms, auditing like private businesses, nonprofits, government. Sitting in Washington, D.C., government contracts is huge. And it's a very popular topic in current, with the Doge going on in the government contracting space.
Sure. Lots of work.
Quickly realized I didn't love verifying, like auditing businesses to put out, statements. As a licensed CPA with that entrepreneurial itch, I stumbled into and, quickly moved into financial due diligence to get into those deals. And I was immediately hooked. Primarily from the people I met, these bankers, private equity folks that have been doing this for 40 years, managing billion-dollar funds, producing significant returns in this private business space. This isn't the stock market. This is private businesses no one knows about. And there's just tons of opportunity and money to be made.
Dude, I mean, I think people sleep on how much money is in just the privately held business sector of the United States. I'm sure you're aware of this, but for those listening that maybe aren't, I want to say the start of the 2020s, maybe it was around COVID-ish. They described the silver hair tsunami of privately held businesses by baby boomers that within the next 5 to 10 years was something like the tune of like 9.5 trillion, I think, in that ballpark. And just, learning, experience, reading, it's like only 1 out of 10 are going to have an ideal exit. So 90% are going to, whether they want to or not, get a less than ideal exit. So is that something that you found in your career with investment banking, and you're like, I'm going to ride this wave?
Yeah, so the silver tsunami was actually not something I learned in banking. That was something I learned when I stumbled into S&B. So I guess just closing the loop about me, I spent about a decade in transaction advisory firms doing CPA financial due diligence for private equity and banks. So being their go-to due diligence partners to verify the earnings of these private businesses, because while their job was to raise capital, they didn't understand accounting and they couldn't read financial statements in a way that accountants can to actually verify that the company they're buying for 5 times multiple actually is producing $1 million. Like they know that when they read the statement, it says that they produce $1 million, but my job was to actually verify that. So fast forward, I got sick of the rat race and still having that entrepreneur itch from the age of 8. And when I started my lawn care service, I knew there was something else. So I decided to basically burn the boats, as Matt Higgins says in his famous best-selling book. And I stood up my own financial diligence practice serving this SMB community. So that's what leads me to the Silver Tsunami, working with entrepreneurs, search funds, ETA, etc.
The phrase burn the boats. A boat is safe in harbor, but it's not what boats are built for. So you essentially did somewhat of the role that you're doing for as part of like the PE space, right? Worked for a company. And now you're like, I can serve multiple people, scratch the entrepreneurial itch, be my own boss, doing the same thing, but with more control over my destiny. Was that the logic between the jump? Because a lot of what I like to talk about in these shows is, you know, what led people to make the career jumps and pivots to start their own business, right? So like when did you know it was the right time for you?
Yeah, so in essence, O'Connell Advisor Group is the same quality of earnings firm that private equity and bankers go to for large scale quality of earnings reports. The gap in the market I saw was there was significant cost pressure being applied to the funds for these deals, which would break quite often, and they would experience significant deal breaking costs. But more importantly, I didn't think the firms were doing a good enough job providing enough value to these entrepreneurs and investors for these deals. They were very rigid with how they delivered their reports, what they could and could not do. And it felt to me that the reports we were producing were lacking value significantly in terms of the purchase price negotiation, negotiating working capital, real dollar for dollar stuff. Unfortunately, in my view, the larger firms were getting too caught up in the minutia of accounting technicals or formatting the document in the correct way. And the point of paying a service provider $50,000 is to deliver 3 to 5 times ROI on that money. It's not to get some fancy report you don't understand.
So your goal for 50K is, hey, I'm going to give you 150 to 250K worth of value. And in order for me to do so, I have to sidestep this sea of red tape and speak to you in a language you understand that's not inundating you with minutia and detail. So how do you communicate to your prospects versus like the traditional big PE way? I feel like that might be a differentiator.
Yeah, so professional services is challenging because we all produce a different mousetrap. We use the same words. Some have fancy offices, some don't. My value proposition is simple. I look to get 5 times ROI for what you pay me. And the way I do that is purchase price negotiation, working capital negotiation, and I have proven testimonials of people I've done it for and how much they have saved. There is no red tape. We have no offices, which means we pass along the cost to you. Lower costs with the same Big Four experience. To me, it's a no-brainer if you can get past, the shiny office and the name behind your.
By keeping your overhead low, you pass that cost savings on to your clients, and you
Yep.
make it accessible to people that may be priced out from the big four.
That's it.
There you go. Simple. Look at that. Marketing in a bottle. Short and sweet. So how long you've been in business and how has it changed from today versus when you started?
Yeah. So launched the firm about 3 years ago. Coming from humble beginnings, when I launched the firm and burned the boats, my goal was to make enough money per month to afford, my mortgage. Short and simple. If I can earn enough per month to pay my bills and mortgage for my family, that was a win. Fast forward 3 years later, last year we did about 50 deals, probably have worked with 100 clients. This year we look to double that number.
Yeah, goals change with experience and case studies and testimonials. That's
Yeah,
cool.
honestly, it's been a humbling and tremendous ride. Like the amount of gratitude I get working with these entrepreneurs and seeing the value I can deliver on a deal by deal basis is the reason why I started the firm without getting too caught up in like the details of what exactly a QAV is or financial diligence. If you're a solo searcher looking to leave corporate America and buy a business, unfortunately, small businesses is the riskiest asset class for a reason. There are high chances of material misstatement in earnings, poor accounting procedures. So the point of my role is to be your non-equity deal partner for a small fee. I don't take equity off the table. You retain 100% ownership and I protect your ass. without, being frank.
Yeah, because this is, look, I mean, investing in a business is not just the money down at the table. It's what liabilities are you taking on? Are you willing to risk putting your name on a limited personal guarantee with a lending institution? It's a lot more than buying a house. And most people, when they buy a house, have a home inspector. But people should probably consider having a Patrick O'Connell when they're buying a business. Similar reasons. And your job, I would say, if that analogy can be afforded, is not giving people reasons why they shouldn't buy a house or buy a business. It's saying this is what the actual value is based on the due diligence and versus reported. And here's some creative ways to restructure a deal to get the darn thing done if you still want it after knowing what you know. Right? Fair?
Yeah. The point of it is, especially if you're using an SBA loan, which a lot of small business acquisition entrepreneurs will use, an SBA loan comes with a personal guarantee. So for those new to this space, a personal guarantee is you get a loan for $5 million from the SBA, you buy a small business, you personally guarantee your entire net worth against that loan. So without being too doom and gloom, if the business cannot support the loan, your entire net worth is liquidated. You lose your house, you lose your car, you lose everything you've worked for in order to pay back that loan. So when people ask me, why should I get a quality of earnings? It's because your livelihood is on the line. And if you screw this up, which unfortunately I've met people who have, it is life changing. It is a life altering event. You need to take it seriously. People will skip home inspections and they'll get away with it. There'll be other people who skip a home inspection and they realize their deck is broken and it's going to cost them $50K. If you skip a Q of E and your deck is broken in the business, you may lose $5 million. So you need to
And that's
ask
saying it
yourself.
lightly. Like, it could be worse.
So yeah. So the point of it is you need to ask yourself, it's a risk reward. Mm-hmm. What do you want to do? How risk tolerant are you?
Speaking of risk tolerance, I have a great friend that is a CPA that does corporate audits, and I want to say Big Four, or maybe like a 5 or a 6, like a larger firm. And he is so not entrepreneurial, right? So like probably same age demo as you and same beginnings type thing, but he loves walking to the big office and he loves the career track to maybe by 40 be partner, loves the grind of corporate. Like that's what he loves. And then I talk to you, Patrick, and you're like, nah, not me. What are some of the how do I say the question? What are some of the unique personality traits that you possess? And I love the guy. He's been a buddy of mine for decades, but like, although you guys similar beginnings, the same like job title thing, totally different people. Like, how do you see yourself in comparison to the guys like my buddy in there versus?
Yeah, both are great life choices. Like, don't get me wrong. When I started my career, I liked going to the fancy office. Unfortunately, I came from an entrepreneur background. Like, I was born an entrepreneur. It sounds cheesy, but it's true. I didn't even know what business was, and I started a lawn care business at 8.
Yeah,
I
if that doesn't
ran,
prove your genetics, what does?
yeah, on the side in college, I started a few side hustles just to pay my bills because I couldn't get a job on campus. The point of it is, I was always looking for ways to get, to make money, to better my life. I came from humble beginnings, family of 7. I basically have been on my own financially since I was like 17. So it was up to me to chart my destiny. I could be the corporate grinder who maybe was underpaid and underappreciated, or I could take my sweat equity and chart my own destiny. So that, again, it sounds cheesy, but that's my mantra.
The bigger risk would be not taking the risk in your.
Yeah, and when I was at the crossroad about 3.5 years ago at my old firm, I might have listened to some podcasts or read in a book where it's like, what is something you ask, someone on their like deathbed? And one of the things the guy said was, I wish I started that business.
Mm.
And it honestly like really stuck with me. And like I get emotional when I talk about it. Like, I knew after I heard that, like, it wasn't an idea, like I had to do it. And from there, like, I quit the next week. It was done. I burned the boats right there because, if I did not do this, I don't want to be that guy. The worst thing that could happen is I just go back to my regular life. And here we are.
The thought experiment that I think about often is at the end of the day on the deathbed, not to get dark, but when I meet your maker, whatever you want to call it, and say, who could I have been? And if that person of the potential who I could have been is way far off than who I was, that scares the living crap out of me today. And that's the risk that I feel like people should really ask themselves. It's like, are you going to, risk regret, or are you going to, risk, um, you know, I think the pain of regrets is a lot more than the pain of a limited personal guarantee if you have the right mindset and the right work ethic.
Yeah, and I agree. And that's why I love working with entrepreneurs. I do work with private equity and capital groups, but the solo entrepreneur, if I could work for free, I would support them because I love seeing the transformation. I call it a second life. When you buy a business, you become a completely different person. And I've had the pleasure of working with these entrepreneurs from the time of them signing a letter of intent to buy a business. Fast forward 3 years into business ownership, and I will joke with them and I'll say, "You're a different person." And they'll say, "No, I'm not." I'm like, "You look the same, but you're different. And here's why." This journey like changes you for the better.
I've been through 7 M&A transactions, far less than you've been a part of. You've done what, 150, 200, something like that? Yeah. So in the 7 that I've been a part of, I will say one truth is that they're all freaking different. But what you said is so true. I never thought of it that way. Like the 3 days in the last 10 years that changed me the most probably were getting married, having a kid, buying a business. Not in any particular order.
It's
So
true.
how is starting your business, right? Because you've helped others to buy. Have you bought one yourself or just started this one?
Yeah, so I've bootstrapped about 3 businesses, and then I'm also like a limited partner in 2 other small businesses. So I haven't gone through like purchasing an SBA loan myself, but I've been on both sides of like the operating table as well as like the service level.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so you get it. How has it changed you in your words?
It's changed me being sitting at the operating level of running a small business or multiple. I understand like the sweat of maybe not making payroll.
Hmm.
And like I understand things you should focus on when you are thinking about buying a business. A lot of it's cash flow, in my opinion. Which
Yeah, cash flow
going
is
back
key.
to, going back to my original point of bigger firms, they don't understand that because the people who work there have never owned a business. They're professional service providers. They don't understand what cash flow is. They've never had to make payroll. So why should they be telling you how to run your business? It makes no sense in my opinion.
Dude, you're preaching to the choir, man. Like, to share experience. When I became a fractional CMO, that term has really exploded in the last couple of years. Like now everybody is one. And I thought that everyone else was just like me when they were fractional CMOs. But what I found is a lot of people have only done marketing as a service provider, like in an agency, or maybe they ran a marketing agency. They want to try new, not even own, but like we're in operations, or maybe they were like in sort of a larger company and they want to branch out and. But I'm like, so how many of you actually bought a business or operated a business with employees? And it was like less than 5% of the people I've ever talked to in CMO world. And I'm like, oh boy, it doesn't hit home to you with those like the stress, having that unlimited personal guarantee on your shoulders. So that's a differentiator, right? Huge differentiator versus the example I gave earlier with the corporate guy. It's like, hey, not only do we know the same stuff, but I feel and empathize with the same stress. You can't buy that. Well, you
Yeah.
can, but if you talk to Patrick, you can.
Yeah, it's true. No, I mean, there's so many ways to slice the onion of how to buy a business, whether it's you're going to bootstrap one or you're going to start one yourself. There's so many words of wisdom, which I kind of post about frequently on some of my social channels. But the end result, people say it's the journey, but it is getting to the finish line of what are you going to do? Are you going to start a business? Are you actually going to burn the boats? Are you going to buy a business? Like there's just many different ways to get there, but I encourage all to try to get there.
I think you made a really interesting point that the finish line of buying a business is actually the starting line of the rest of everything. And you said before, it's like, hey, you're a new person. But I think that for some people, especially a lot of those that are listening. So a lot of my listeners are people that are between 25 and 44 that may want to get into, out of the corporate grind into, business ownership, right? It's great to have the idea, but until you talk to someone like Patrick or you talk to people that do M&A advisory, you need to have a plan and you need to know what it costs. Like you can do almost anything as long as you pay the price. But if you don't take that at least the step, don't just buy one and take the owner's word from it and don't talk to anybody about, because then you'd be turned off and think that, oh, all acquisitions are a mess. So with the clients you serve, how many of them are first time owners and how many of them is like their second, third, 10th acquisition?
Yeah, first time business buyers, probably 30 or 40%, a good amount, 30 to 40%. And then the other piece being capital groups or multi business owners.
So the three verticals, so to speak.
Yeah, three verticals.
How's the psychograph? How is the mindset for how you provide the service for the first timers? Obviously, the institutional people, they see this all the time. And the multiple people have kind of been there and done that. But for the first time people, how is it different? Not in what you do, but how you do it in the client service relationships aspect.
Yeah, so working with first time business buyers is actually my personal favorite. The revenue and billing side of it is a different discussion. The hands on approach for first time buyers is a lot more education that goes into it, which is something, I take pride in. Really, I serve them as like a deal partner. So I coach them through the process and explain these complicated terms and break it down into simple, like real language they can understand. Because the minutia and technical elements of deal making is pretty complicated. Like this is, there's a lot of challenges. So just breaking it down into simple terms for my client, the buyer, as well as the seller, is where I spend a lot of my days.
Right. So you're translating in, you're not trying to speak above their head. It's how do you break down something that they otherwise would just glaze over, in one ear at the other and really make it stick. It's interesting you said, because when I first got in M&A, I remember so many podcasts and books and blogs and all this stuff. I read and consumed so much content. But then as soon as it started happening with the process from signed LOI to closing table, none of that stuff that I consumed in content like could prepare for what actually happened. And then by having people that have been there and done that, like yourself, that's where I learned like 99% of the actual what was going on. So I encourage everyone to subscribe to Patrick's YouTube channel, right? That might just be indicative of me, but also like taking those steps is worth so much more than just consuming the content only. So the difference between being a wantrepreneur and being an entrepreneur is just action.
Yeah, so true. And my YouTube channel is just my name. I do weekly webinars where we kind of highlight a lot of this. And the point of the webinars and learning series is one, to improve, the ways I, kind of communicate the technical elements of buying businesses. Because the realities of it is the more deals you do, the more live deals you do, the better you get at them. I've had the privilege of doing hundreds of transactions. And because I've done hundreds, I can apply old deals to your current deal. That's really the differences in why it's important to do a lot of deals. So that's really the point of my YouTube channel. It's all free and I give it away.
Yeah. I think comparison can be made with marketing too. Like one of the things that gave me any confidence, so to speak, was I worked at an agency where I was doing marketing for like 160 different clients at a time. So then you kind of see patterns and trends across, like every client's different, every business is different, but like there's a whole awful lot of the same problems I run into and pitfalls. And probably same lesson applies to, sitting where you're at. It's like, if someone asked me, this is a funny sales comment I'll share with you. Have you ever worked with a client with a business that's exactly like mine? That's the same size, same goals, same industry. I was like, no, I didn't work with your direct competitors, but I've worked with a dozen people that are kind of similar. And I could say 3 other dozen companies that have the same points there. So broadening your frame of reference, getting those reps in, to your point, that's just a differentiator of how you can serve your clients.
Yeah, it's so true. And I break it down into simple components with the goal of where do you want to go? And I show you how to get there.
Yeah, you're a guide, right?
I am. Yep. In essence.
So what would you say is your big, hairy, audacious goal, or the one challenge? Like if you could solve this one goal out of, I'm sure, plenty, what would it be and why?
One goal.
Or a couple goals, top two or three, if that's too hard.
One goal would be to, get to work with 1,000 entrepreneurs to buy businesses. That's like my 2040 goal. The second is I like to, my mantra at my firm is one deal at a time. Like every deal we do, we treat it as it's the first deal and the last deal we'll ever do. Because in my view, there's so much on the line for each transaction. We need to be on our A game at all times.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's why the mantra is one deal at a time. Act like it's your last deal because there's just so much on the line for these entrepreneurs. And sitting at that entrepreneur level myself, I need to deliver maximum value for your deal.
Help 1,000 entrepreneurs buy a small business one at a time. If you could go back in time to when you were starting your lawn care business at the ripe old age of 8, what would you, how would that conversation go? What would you tell them? What advice? Or what would you ask them?
I'd ask them probably to build it out, see how far we can run with it. It was just me and my brother. We might have maybe hired a neighbor, started marketing, etc. So you try to blow it up.
Keep on mowing.
Keep on mowing.
Mow to grow. And then what about the end of the day? Like if you're talking to yourself at say 80 years old or, deathbed, what would you want to ask them and how would that conversation go?
I'd want to ask if it all worked out. If you're satisfied with your life, if, speaking for me, if you were sitting on your deathbed or at 80, like, did you have no regrets? And I'd hope my answer is yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's, to me, if you can solve for that one thing for a personal legacy, it's like the rest of the stuff takes care of itself.
It really does.
Awesome. Patrick, this part of the show is one of my burgeoning favorites, and it's ask a question, leave a question. So the last guest that I interviewed has a question for you. And without knowing who you were, what you're all about, and then you have the opportunity to ask a question for the next guest I won't tell you who that is either.
All right.
Cool. So what is the number one way to impact your family?
Be present. Be present in what you do. I still work on this daily. Being present, no phones at the dinner table, having some boundaries, I think is the most impactful. And that's something I still work on today.
No, I think that's simple and sweet. And what question do you have for the next guest?
Let me see. Next guest, what's your biggest win of the past 12 months? Personally and professionally.
I love that. I love sharing success, and it's a good frame.
Yeah. Sometimes you can do a failure too. If you're trying to mix it up.
Or overcoming a failure, it could be a win in and of itself, right? Like I beat cancer. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Patrick, that's what I got for you. The only other question, super superficial, is where can people connect to you, learn more, get in touch, etc.?
Yeah, so if you're an entrepreneur looking to buy a small business, check out o'conneladvisorgroup.com. All of our resources are posted there. If you want to connect with me directly, you can go to my LinkedIn, which is just my name, my YouTube channel, which is just my name. And then on X, my handle is SMB Deal Guy, very active on all platforms. So if you want to say hi, give me critique about this podcast, because I'm still looking to better my public speaking, or just meet and say hello, feel free to give me a shout.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick, for the insights. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Without you listening, I wouldn't be doing the show. And the show won't grow if you don't share with a friend. So if you found this conversation insightful, send it to someone who might also benefit. Thank you, Patrick. Everyone else, be well.
Thank you. See ya.